Hello and welcome to the Vedic Conversation, where each episode we take a different topic and look at it through the lens of storytelling and from the perspective of the Veda, an ancient but still very much relevant body of knowledge from India. I'm Rory Kinsella, a Vedic meditation teacher based here in Sydney, and I'm joined by my Vedic colleagues Thompson in London and Derrick Yanford in New York. And this week we welcome to the show Tim Brown. Tim is Australia's longest serving Vedic meditation teacher, having been teaching since 2001. Tim has taught more than 6,000 people to meditate, from captains of industry to TV personalities, from Hollywood stars to elite athletes, including current Wallabies and Australian cricket team members. And Tim runs retreats up and down Australia's east coast and has taught inmates at Long Bay Jail here in Sydney. And he's also taught dozens of people to be initiators of Vedic meditation. But more importantly, Tim is my meditation teacher. So sit back and enjoy the show, and don't forget to stick around to the end, where you can find out about how to get involved yourself. So Tim, you've been a huge influence on my life, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the show.
Thanks, Rory G. We call Rory G, because in India, G is a term of endearment, and so when we've travelled to India together, he was also always Rory G. So we called him Rory G, and it's a real pleasure to be on the Vedic Conversation.
Great. So Tim, I remember when we were doing our teacher training that you said that one of the things that contributed to your enduring success as a teacher was pretty much that you're a regular bloke, a normal guy that people can relate to, used to drink beer, play rugby, not really out there, and that really helped give you credibility with a certain demographic, corporate people, professionals. Could you talk a bit about that and how it's contributed to your 20 years of success as a meditation teacher?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally a country boy from out in central West New South Wales, and I then came to Sydney and did my schooling here in Sydney. But I was before all of this, I was a rugby playing, beer drinking agricultural economist, and I in fact finished school and university and got myself a job in Uzbekistan in the 90s, and I lived in a Muslim village on my own pretty much in 1996, 97, 98, developing models to privatize agriculture in the former Soviet in my former role. So you can imagine when I ended up being a meditation teacher, it was a bit of a left-hand turn. But when I myself learned 25 years ago with my teacher, Tom Knowles, who was a trained neuroscientist who'd given up a career in neuroscience to teach meditation. That's what really got me into it. And he was a very normal kind of a fella. And I learned to meditate with him, went back into the corporate world for a few years, did some things, and then decided to train with him. Trained with him in Flagstaff, Arizona, spent a year living with him and his family in Flagstaff, Arizona in 2000, and then came back and set up the center here in Paddington in Sydney. And I very deliberately set up my center opposite a pub, right opposite the pub, and quite a famous pub here in Sydney. And the whole reason for that was I wanted to show people that this was all about being in the world, not out of it. And the pub here is in the most densely populated kind of part of Sydney. Little houses, Victorian terrace houses, cheek by jowl. And I love it. And people say, "Where's your centre?" I say, "Do you know that famous, four-in-hand pub?" And they say, "Yes." And I say, "Well, if you rolled out of the pub, you'd roll into my meditation centre." And our little motto here is, if they can't help you across the road, we're pretty sure we can. And if we can't help you, we can always send you back. And I've always kind of taken that approach, and I'm deeply, reverential towards the tradition. But I think a little bit of levity around all of this. It doesn't have to be all serious. This is all to be enjoyed. And so I've really kind of sat in that space. And I think that's probably why I've attracted a different group of people to meditation, and continue to do so here in Sydney.
Great. It was interesting you talking about your teacher Tom, and I guess for people aware of Tom now, we're aware of this long white beard, often Indian robes. But I know from the picture, which is maybe even behind you right now, that Tom used to be quite a clean cut, kind of lawyer looking guy. Could you talk about how Tom used to be when you were learning with him compared to how he is now?
Very much so. I remember the day that I went to learn to meditate with him, and just up here in Jersey Road, probably 300 meters from here. And I had no idea what was going on. Just back a little bit, my process was I went to school, university, ended up in Uzbekistan, lived with the local villagers there, amazing people who had nothing, some of the most deeply connected community, and incredible people. Came back to Australia. I was 24, just about to turn 25, and I found myself, at the same pub on the same night of the week, having the same conversation that I'd been having 5 years earlier. And I just thought, is this what we do for the rest of our lives? And it really kind of brought up, that was really a bit of an existential moment for me. I was being interviewed by people at the top of my industry, being offered jobs at a pretty good CV, age 24, 25. And I was looking at these people, and they were absolute car wrecks. They were a mess. They're all overweight, and you could tell they were drinking too much. And so there I was being offered the top of my field, and thinking, is this what it's all about? And that wasn't particularly attractive, to be honest. And so I really had a bit of an existential moment, started asking some pretty big questions, age 24, 25. And I was introduced to Tom, as my aunt introduced me to him. And I remember walking up to the house there and thinking, what on earth am I doing? And I knocked on the door, and a guy answered the door in a pair of moleskins, pants and a shirt, clean cut, shaved head and very tidy looking. I assumed he was the secretary, I was convinced the big kahuna was upstairs levitating, in his robes. And I remember quite clearly saying, hello, my name's Tim Brown. I'm here to meet with Mr. Knowles. And this guy deadpan at the door said, yes, he's expecting you. Straight face, not a twinkle in his eye. And I just stood there and I thought, is there a password to get in here, or how does this work? And then he burst into the smile. He said, by the way, you can call me Tom, and come in. And there was a pair of riding boots, the famous brand of riding boots here in Australia, and called. I've just gone completely blank. Rory, help me out.
It'll come to me. I know exactly what you mean.
Fundamentally Australian. And that, there were his riding boots, and he was a very normal guy, and he was married and had kids and lived locally. And I remember sitting down with him, and we talked about stress, and we talked about stress management. We talked about consciousness. We talked about unified field theorem. We talked about a whole bunch of things in an hour. And at the end of that hour, he said to me, Tim, you seem like a relatively bright kind of a fella. We could talk about this for decades, he said, but what'll really make a difference is if you learn to meditate. And so why don't you have a little think about that and get back to me? And I said, mate, when can we get started? And he said, well, I've got a slot tomorrow at 10:30. I said, book me in. And that day changed my life.
Um, Amazing. And I guess do you feel lucky for having come across meditation relatively young? So I guess you've had this chance to get it young and then become a teacher quite young. I know all of us at least were late 30s, 40s when we became teachers. Um, it must have been quite a rare thing among your friend group to start having these, because it sounds like a midlife crisis kind of thing, which is
Oh,
my
yeah,
my,
without
my
doubt.
story around getting into meditation. But for you to have that at 24,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
definitely still in the pub at that point for
yeah,
another 10 years.
yeah. Um, and yeah, I feel very fortunate. Um, and yeah, look, I'd always been a kind of quite a considered person. I'd always, ruminated on things a bit, um, and I hadn't really had a clear pathway in my life. I'd always kind of felt a little bit like that, and I kind of made my way through. But yes, I do feel incredibly fortunate. I remember the first thought. I remember the first thought I had coming out of my first meditation and having transcended for the first time. And I just remember thinking, if I just had this at school and university, if I just had it. And over the last 6,000 odd initiations that I've facilitated, I would say that every single one of those people, including my 4-year-old son when I initiated him about 13 years ago, has come out and within the first probably 5 minutes of coming out of their first meditation said, if I just, gosh, that was amazing. If I just had this, at some time prior. And I remember my son, I taught him, he meditated for 4 minutes, opened his eyes, and I said to him, so how did that make you feel, mate? And he looked at me, he said, made me feel relaxed and happy, Dad. And I said, fantastic, that was easy. And then he said, this would have been handy yesterday when Gracie, his little sister, was really irritating me. And I said, well, you're going to get a lifetime worth of value out of that mantra then. And I've taught a 94-year-old woman. I remember this most wonderful, graceful, dignified woman, just wanting to learn new things. And she came out of her first meditation and she said, oh, that felt so fantastic, Tim. She said, this would have been so great in my 70s. I had quite a challenging time then and would have been very handy then. I thought, what a wonderful thing to say. But I really believe that we're all here, we're all here in our current conscious state, doing the research that we need to do to get to the point to ask the question. And there's a built-in mechanism in the universe that says when the student is ready, the knowledge turns up somehow or other at the level at which we're able to, connect with it. And it might be in a song, it might be in a book, it might be in a Instagram meme, it might be, in a direct connection with a teacher, as I was so fortunate to have. But that's the way it works. And that's what everybody is doing. We're all here doing the research that we need to do to get to the point to ask the question. And the moment we ask that truly, then the knowledge arrives. It's right there at the door. It's just waiting for us to invite it in.
I'm interested by this concept of, when the moment arrives, you kind of step up. It's a natural process. So in 2000, when you went to Flagstaff to learn to become a teacher, I know you were one of the very first, perhaps the second or third person to be taught by Tom. Then you go back to Australia with no colleagues. You're alone. You have nobody. I mean, Tom obviously is supporting you, across the other side of the world. But how did you move forward in such a potentially lonely situation?
Mm. Yeah, so I was Tom's first student. I remember going to him one day here in Sydney, And I learned with him. I was back in the corporate world. I was meditating twice a day. And I had, friends of mine coming up to me, and I was just feeling more relaxed. I moved out of agriculture. I didn't really want to pursue that. I moved into event management with my sister. She and I brought Mikhail Gorbachev and General Norman Schwarzkopf out here in 1999 and ran an event here, put 10,000 people in the room in Sydney with them. Because I'd learned to speak Russian in Uzbekistan, I chaperoned Mikhail Gorbachev and his wife Raisa around Sydney. An amazing experience. It's a whole other story. I then moved out of that into brand strategy and development for a couple of years in the .com days. I was doing these things that I would have never had the confidence to do, to be honest. Never taken those steps. It would have been, you're a country boy, you did ag, this is what and that's your pathway. And, stick it out. And all of a sudden, as I opened myself up, the opportunities started rolling in. I was saying yes. Things were happening. And my friends were saying, like, what are you, mate? What are you on? And I was like, I'm meditating. And they were like, where do you get some of that? I was like, go and see this bloke. And so there was a bit of a goat trap between me and Tom. And I got invited into a protege group of his. And sorry, I've just got a break there. R.M. Williams is the name of the boots. Yes. And I must pay respect and honor them. I can't believe it slipped my mind. Anyway, I got invited into this protege group, and one day I went to Tom. I was supporting him with his teaching. I was just helping out, making tea and, cleaning up around the place and, quietly trying to make myself useful. And I went to him one day and I said, I was seeing people meditate and transform their lives. And went to him one day, I said, Tom, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be able to teach this. And he looked at me with a wry smile and said, I noticed. And he said, your timing's immaculate. He said, my father, and Tom's father was a 4-star general in the US Air Force. And they used to call him the general. He was referred to as the general by the family. It wasn't dad or, the general. And he said the general's just passed away in Flagstaff, Arizona. And after 35 years on the road and in Australia, I've got to go back to Flagstaff, Arizona. He said, I've taught 10,000 people to meditate here in Australia. I've got to go home. I'm head of the family and I've got to go home. And I haven't told anyone. He said, I've had a few sleepless nights. Tom doesn't have sleepless nights, right? He said, I've had a few sleepless nights thinking about what we're going to do here in Australia, with a big smile on his face. And he said, so if you want to, I'll go to Flagstaff, Arizona, get the family settled, and then I'll let you know. And if you want to, jump on a plane, come to Flagstaff, Arizona, and I'll train you and send you back to Sydney as my successor. And I said, great. And so off he went with the family. And about 6-7 weeks later, I got a fax, back in the old days, Derrick. And he said, if you're serious, get on a plane, come here to Flagstaff, Arizona. I'll pick you up at the airport. And so I must have been 28, I guess, 27 then. Jumped on a plane. I wasn't engaged or married, didn't have kids at the time. And jumped on a plane off to Flagstaff, Arizona, moved into a house with Tom and his wife and his 4 kids under 6. And I did my Mr. Miyagi year with him. I, polished things and mowed lawns and washed dishes and changed nappies. There were nappies everywhere, 4 kids like this. And studied with Tom. And he was reacquainting himself with Flagstaff, Arizona, where he'd grown up as a kid, but had been away for 35 odd years. And so we hiked the canyons of Flagstaff and Sedona, and it was an amazing year. And I studied with him, and then came back to Sydney, full of bull, and all revved up and ready to go, and expecting there to be a queue of people waiting for me at the airport. Of course, that wasn't quite right. But moved in with my girlfriend and got engaged, got married, had 3 kids under 2 years, 9 months, no twins. They're currently 15, 16, and 17. And we've taught over 6,000 people to meditate over that time. But to answer your question, Anthony, it was pretty lonely. Tom really has a bit of a policy of, you get trained, you get the mantras, and then you're out, you get out the nest, right? And it was pretty tough, to be honest. And just trying to work my way through. There was no organization. There was nothing. And it was a double-edged sword. One, I got to carve my own path. I had no reference point, wasn't being governed by anybody else. I really got to develop my own flavor. I really had to stand on my own feet. So it was very challenging, but it was also really wonderful that I got to sing to my own tune. And that's been very good and very special. And I've had to really go into myself to work through a lot of things kind of on my own. But now there's a very big community, and I'm teaching teachers, Tom's teaching teachers. The Vedic meditation community is just exploding, and it's a very exciting time in human history. We have something that people of the world can enormously benefit from, and it's not the only way to do this. It's just we love our tradition, and we love the way that it works, and it sits in with day-to-day living. But as we all know, there are many ways into all of this. But we love our tradition, and I feel very honored to be teaching this knowledge in this time. I mean, especially in this time. My big narrative these days is the fundamental thing in these days is the desire for freedom. What we all seek is freedom. We all want to feel free. And one of the great lessons Mother Nature is trying to teach us right now is to look for that not outside of us because it doesn't exist there, but to find it within ourselves. And in all different cultures at different time in human history, often in times of crisis, great teaching lines have risen, and they have all said the same thing. I'm here to remind you that which you truly seek is within you. And I love this when you break it down. I'm here to remind you, inferring that we've forgotten. That which you truly seek. What is it that we seek? Freedom. Where does that lie? It lies within you. And the analogy I use, it's no different from that, that big happy Buddha there, right there in that bookcase behind me. And if I'd never sat in this chair before and I didn't know, and I marched into this room and sat in the chair and sat down, and someone had told me about the big fat happy Buddha made of marble on the bookshelf in the room at 118 Sutherland Street opposite the pub in Paddington. And I marched in here, sat down, and went, right, where is it? And got all wound up because, Rory told me there was this, statue here. Until eventually, Rory says, Tim, it's behind you. And I turn around and, sure enough, there he is. And I think that's the message of this age. Stop looking outside for something that's not there.
I liked what you were saying the other day, Tim, how you kind of boiled your kind of intro talk down to pointing to twice. Can you talk us through that?
As you can see, I'm not short of a word. And my wife constantly is saying, and she's got a better lexicon than I. She says that just try and be a little more pithy, which means a bit more economic with your wording. Anyway, so when people say to me, tell me in the simplest way you possibly can what it is that you teach. And I say, I show people how to do that rather than that. And what humanity has been doing for a couple of thousand years is we've been going this way. Go, 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 go. go this way, go forward. And what we're learning in our whole teaching, and you can break it down into Vedic philosophy and quote the Bhagavad Gita and this and that. But the teaching is go this way and then go that way. That's it. And when we look at that principle, it's a universal law of nature. Every tree and plant, that little plant right there, knows if it wants to go that way into the world, it has to go that way first. It's got to do this work and then it can go this way. Everyone in construction knows you've got to go that way before you go that way. Every archer knows they draw the bowstring back a few inches and then release it, and they gain the dynamic that they're after. Same with a golf club. Every golfer, as they address a ball, down there in Derrick, down in Florida, just outside your window, Derrick, there's probably someone
Down
that they've got, yeah, they address a ball and they've got one of two options. Someone says, ready, set, go, put that ball in that hole. And they've got one of two options. They can start flicking it down the fairway, 10 meters and 20 and 30 and 40. Or they can address that ball and do something very, very strange. Spend a little bit of time and effort and energy drawing that club back, to create the potential of it and then release. And this is what we're being taught. And Mother Nature is starting to command of us that we take a new approach. And that new approach is very simply go this way first and then go this way. And that's the lesson at the highest level. That's the lesson that Mother Nature is trying to teach us, because this other model is unsustainable. I've been sharing with people recently the worldometer, the population clock. I love watching that thing. It's just mind-boggling. And I was watching it just now, a minute ago. I popped it up there. You can probably share it, Rory, if you wanted to. But you watch that thing live, and just this morning, there's been births, deaths, net. I think another so far this morning in Australia, Australian time is like 50 million additional net humans on the planet today. By the end of today, there'll be an additional net 200 million human beings on the planet than there was yesterday. That's about 1.4 million additional humans on the planet net in a pandemic year than there was last week. Something like 80 odd million additional so far this year. I mean, if we keep running this model of trying to acquire our freedom, which includes our stability, security, non-change, contentment, happiness, fulfillment, freedom, peace, through relative acquisition, this planet can't continue to do that. And I don't see it as a problem. I just see that we're now at this level where nature is going to move us into understanding a new way. And it's exciting. And all of this, I read a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel by a guy called Jared Diamond, maybe 20 years ago, Anthony. I think is he an British anthropologist, I think. Amazing book, and it was really talking about why did the English dominate, the ocean, and how they became such a dominant, force. And this guy worked it all the way back to this particular mountain range that runs in a particular direction in northern England that captures the moisture that causes the yew tree to grow, which allows, and the particular qualities of the yew tree is that it's very strong and very flexible, which means that they could produce the longbow, which allowed them to dominate naval warfare, which meant that they really kind of dominated the world for a number of 100 years. And I love that principle of proximate cause. When we get right, how do we can go right back to the proximate cause of things? And we see this pandemic, and what's the proximate cause? And the answer is humans not feeling fulfilled and feeling that inner, stable, secure, fulfilled, content, happy state within. And as a result of that, those desires must be fulfilled. So it drives us into the outside world to, you know, get the house and get the money and get the this and get the that and get the, and the excessive nature of that with a population that's growing by, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions a week, we can see where this is going. And I'm an optimist. I'm a massive optimist. I think this is just going to get us to ask the questions. That's what this is about. Mother Nature will whisper in our ear, and if we ignore that, she'll tap us on the shoulder. If we ignore that, she'll poke us in the chest. If we ignore that, she'll slap us across the face, right up to what I call the cosmic kick up the Khyber.
I love that.
You know what the Khyber Pass is, Derrick? I think Anthony should explain.
Well, it was a very difficult range of mountains to get over, and the Khyber Pass was the place where everybody, when they were invading India, always came unstuck because it was narrow and precipitous, and the defenders could easily pick off the enemy as they came through this narrow gorge. But Tim, it's fascinating you talking about you, because unfortunately the British use of you on the cricket pitch ain't so good at the moment.
Well, we're about to find out. If we can get you guys down here to Australia, we'll find out.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Tim, about, because you mentioned, and when I hear you speak of the numbers, the additional human beings that are coming into the world at the rate in which they do, I'm curious if that in some way instills a greater sense of urgency inside of you to get meditation in the hands of all of these new human beings. And if so, with your long range of teaching, does it inform maybe innovating or somehow doing it a little bit differently so that you are more available and more people have access to you? Or do you believe in continuing doing the meditation and teaching the way that you have, with the idea that the teacher and student will meet at whatever time and I don't need to change how I'm doing it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there is a building urgency, and I think that's exciting. I used to watch a show as a young boy called MacGyver. Does anyone know that show?
Yeah.
Okay, so you remember the story? It was always about something happened and some drama, and MacGyver was the leading character, and he just managed to, at the last moment, as the bomb was about to go off, he'd pull the hairpin out of the dame's hair, and undo the nuclear weapon with the hairpin, right? And it'd go, tick 0 as he pulled it out. And I think, these made for great stories, the MacGyver. And someone says, so what, do you have a religion? I say, yeah, I'm a MacGyverist.
That's great.
And I think the way that we work is that, often it's not until we get to that moment, in time that the catalyst that acts as the catalyst for us to move and change. And I think, the temperature's rising, literally. And I think this is exciting because it's what's going to get us all to think differently. And, there are enormous challenges. We've been in lockdown here now in Sydney for the last 7 odd weeks. Again, I've got 3 teenagers, homeschooling. I cannot complain for one moment. We live in Bronte Beach, which is absolutely heaven on earth. And I can wander down there. I swim in the ocean there, try and get in there 365 days a year. And I'll head down there afterwards and have a swim and meditate on the beach and have a coffee after. So no complaints. But there are so many wonderful things that are coming, and it is incredibly challenging. But what is this about? This is nature trying to, she's lovingly, Mother loves us so much, that she'll do whatever she needs to do to get our attention. And, she's now got our attention. We all got sent to our bedrooms, to have a good think about the way we were, living our lives. And it was incredibly liberating for me when I when this clicked for me, it was like, this all now makes sense, because numbers increasing, planet Earth, lots of people, and we've been running this model and we've been taught it since we were in kindergarten, go forward, acquire your way to stability, security, fulfillment, contentment, happiness. It's been drilled into us, the whole education system. I mean, to be honest, I'm incredibly excited that this event will disrupt the education system. It's the next one on the list. Music went a bunch of years ago, with the internet, books went. Various other education system has to change. It is archaic. It is built for the Industrial Revolution. And, one person up the front with 30 children in a room is an unfair fight. Flat out unfair fight. I'm seeing, and there's some real challenges, but I'm seeing my kids on Zoom, and the schools are trying to pivot and adapt. But where they are focused, they are getting direct information from that teacher without being disrupted by 30 other kids. They're making their way through it. There's some wonderful things happening here. So many exciting things. The disruption around this will get us to learn how to live more artfully on this planet. To answer your question, Derrick, yes. And I think the audience is there. People are starting to ask questions. When I hear people say, "Oh, it'll just, we'll just get through this lockdown, we'll do the thing, and then we can get back to normal," I just think, what a horrible thought. But there are a lot of people that think that way. And it's not going to be the same. And thank goodness. I stood next to a guy while I was waiting for my coffee the other day. Young professional, 30 years old, standing there with his 18-month-old baby boy. Gorgeous little fella. And I said, how's your little guy going with lockdown? He said, "Oh, no, he's great. It's really good." And I said, "How's work for you?" He said, "Oh, no, it's fantastic." He said, the week we had the baby 18 months ago, we got locked down. And so I was really there during the weeks and months that he first came into the world. And he said, then we got called back into the office for about 6 weeks. And he said, I hated it. He said, I really missed, being part of the family and being around and hanging out with my kid. And he said, then fortunately lockdown came again. And this guy was probably a merchant banker, an accountant, or a lawyer. Like he was, and he said, yeah, we're making it work. And he said, I just love it. I'm around. He said, my father wasn't around at all. And he wasn't, my father was never around. He was always at work. And he said, I just love it. He said, I'll never go back to an office full time, ever. I won't have it. I'll change businesses. I'll do whatever it takes, but I'll never live like that again. And so I think Mother Nature's now got our attention. And Mother Nature, she says, come willingly or come in cuffs. How do you want to do this? Your decision, And I think if we can understand what's happening, we are being asked to engage and relate more artfully to the world. Mother Nature, all of this, when you get back to the proximate cause, it comes down to humans not looking for that stability, security, non-change, contentment, fulfillment, happiness, and freedom within. We've been outside trying to organize it, which simply cannot be done. It's not because we're not trying hard enough. It's not because we're not focused. It's not because we're not smart. It's not because we didn't try hard enough at school. It's because it cannot be done. And this is the realization that's coming. The anxiety and depression epidemic is a function of people running a model of trying to gain and fulfill those desires through relative acquisition. And it's not because they're not trying hard enough. It's because it cannot be done. And it's like walking towards the horizon. We walk towards the horizon, it falls away. We walk towards it, falls away. And this is debilitating people. But this is the research that we need to do to get to the point where we ask the questions. And the collective consciousness is starting to really ask that question. The bell curve of humanity is starting to come through that. And it's very exciting. and it will get us to change the way we relate to ourselves and absolutely everything else. And we're right in the interface of that. This is an incredibly exciting time to be on this planet, and we've all got a role to play.
So I'm curious then too, if you wouldn't mind speaking to, I guess we've heard that you've initiated thousands of people into the tradition. As far as bringing teachers into the world, is that like your focus now, is bringing teachers into the world, and how many teachers have you trained?
I've trained 30 teachers so far, and yes, I really do. And this goes back into the other part of your last question, Derrick, which is, the interaction between a student and a human being. There's something, teacher and student. There's something unbelievably, and I think we've all had the benefit of that. Is just unbelievably powerful. We're seeing all these apps come through. And here in Australia, Headspace, Calm, Smiling Minds, Insight Timer, there's a bunch of them. And people often say to me, "Oh, Tim, you must hate those apps." And I say, "No, I love those apps." Because at 3 o'clock in the morning when someone can't sleep, and they've never approached meditation before, and they want to do this a little bit at arm's length so that no one kind of knows, and they pick up and download the app and they have a go, and guess what happens? Something happens. And they use that for a little while, and it'll get them to a certain level, but then it caps out. And then they go, "Well, this is kind of amazing. There's something to this." And then they start talking to a few friends, and they all meditate, and they couldn't, no one told them, but everyone else is meditating around them. and then they come and take the next step. And so I'm a massive advocate for those things. Wonderful. But I think, when you can have a teacher-student experience, it takes the whole thing to this next level. And I think we honor all these other things, and we know that the teacher-student thing is really something very special. And so that's why my plan is to continue to train teachers, because I talk about teachers, the way I talk about it is it's like gelato. Gelato, 99% the same thing. But that little bit of chocolate, or that little bit of pistachio, or that little bit of strawberry, or that little bit of vanilla. And some people love vanilla, and some people like chocolate, and some people like strawberry, and some people like pistachio. And it's 99% the same stuff. Right? And this is what our individuality, our personality can do. And I know that there were people, that would look at me and go, "Who's that bloke?" I wouldn't, I don't see myself in him. I don't connect with him. I wouldn't be interested in learning anything from him. And I totally understand that. That's perfectly all right. And other people go, "Yeah, I get that guy. He's kind of a bit like me, and I feel I can connect." And that's what I plan to do. And I'm doing is, I really love being able to bring a strong structure of knowledge that I can transfer to people, and then they can bring their personality to it. And that's what the world needs. We need more flavors. We need more flavors of people with all their story and their thing. And so people look at them and say, "I see myself in you." And that is the most important thing. And Rory would remember this from our initiator training. When I'm going to train someone to be a teacher, I insist on 3 things. I look for 3 qualities. We've got to be available, we've got to be approachable, we've got to be relevant. And if you don't have those 3 qualities, you can have you can be a Vedic scholar and all the Vedas floating around your head. But if you are not approachable, available, and relevant, you are useless. And this is where our personality and our story becomes so valuable. And where I see, certain traditions and all of that trying to make everyone vanilla, or everyone strawberry, or everyone, the same, I don't agree with that. And I think one of the fundamental principles of yoga is strength and flexibility, and the right balance of those things. And I think that's the place I dance in. a little bit in myself is how do we maintain the strength of our knowledge and then create a beautiful layer of flex in that allows it to be alive and be really alive and lively and playful and all of those things. I've seen too many traditions get way too serious about themselves, and they kill off that playfulness and they kill off that liveliness and the oxygen, the prana in the knowledge. And this is often done in the spirit of maintaining purity. But in fact, if that's done, which is strength, that's a strength, the purity of it. But when that's taken too far, it becomes rigid, and anything that's rigid breaks.
I like your analogy of the. Sorry.
No. So there's that beautiful dance, and we call it the lila. The dance for trying to, and it's a constant dynamic. And I think that's where, when you understand that, that becomes the joy and play of the whole thing.
I like your analogy of the ice cream, and I'm just wondering, as an ice cream provider, are you using a hand tool? Are you using an analog system, or are you using a power tool, a digital system to make this happen?
Great question. Look, I think, back to that idea. I mean, I think this tool that we have, the internet, is just, you can see the intelligence. We've been given this tool, and then things like the pandemic and those things turn up. Imagine this current scenario without the internet. Imagine how different this would be. This is such a wonderful time. I mean, what I love about the internet, it collapses time and space. I mean, look at us all here. And look at our flavors too. I mean, I'm just looking at the flavors. That's like standing at the ice cream, window, looking at it, and there's these 4 wonderful flavors. I mean, how fantastic.
Tim does have a sweet
tooth. Yeah. Shocking sweet tooth is more correct. I love ice cream. But imagine this, and so I think we've got to use the right tool in the right scenario. I'm a closet carpenter. I love carpentry, and I do have a whole bunch of tools in my little garage, and I build things. My son has really taken to it as well. I love tinkering with things, but I think we've got to use the right tool in the right place. That's really the right thing and the right way. And in our tradition, in the Vedic tradition, one of the really strong points is that mantras are not provided online, and that work is done in person. And that's something that I will personally, I will hold to. I just feel like that is very important. I think there is a really special moment there when the process is followed. The ceremony of acknowledgement of our tradition is done. That mantra is provided in person, and then instruction is begun. And I'll be honest, I've run some experiments, during lockdown where I've seen people suffering and desperately in need of knowledge. And, I've tried some things. One of the things that I have done is I've, done one-on-one initiations and then done follow-up online, that, sessions 2, 3, and 4. Right when people are really in need. And that's worked very, very well. And then I've, off the back of that, then said, we can get you 80% of the experience this way. And then I'll come in behind that, and we will do extra work at the back end so that you can enjoy and get started in meditating right now inside of this time where you have time. And then I will make sure that this thing is rock solid in the back. I'm not a fly-by-night kind of guy. And I really believe we've got to work out how to find that strength and flexibility. And we've got to get creative while maintaining that strength inside of our teaching. So what I'm really doing at the moment, while I can't see, groups of people and things, is I've really kind of this time tried to provide knowledge, provide information, that puts all of this in context for people, that is valuable. And so that when we can be together again, that there are people that I've seen it over the years. I've seen people where they've booked in for a course. They haven't come and learned yet, but they'll say, as soon as I booked in, things started shifting and moving, and so even that intention and that intention made and that commitment will start to cause shifts and movements in people. And so I'm really kind of working on that, is how do I deliver knowledge in this format that shows how relevant, available and approachable this knowledge is. And then when we can be in person and we can do that one-to-one or that teaching in person, then we'll do that. And I'm always working out ways that can be done, appropriately, and safely, and all of those things. And I think that's the way I'm trying to kind of weave my way through this. But this, the internet and Instagram and social media and all of those kinds of things are wonderful, portals through which people can be in contact with us at a certain level. And I think used properly, they are just fantastic. And then the more initiators we can have around the world, then, they can go to that person and they can find their flavor, and they can find someone that they find approachable, relevant, and available, and connect with them. And the depth of experience that is available then to them is just extraordinary, as we all know.
Imagine if we're trying to do this over fax.
I mean, isn't this amazing? We think nothing of it, but, we're collapsing time and space. This thing gets recorded. Someone can watch it whenever it suits them at any time in the future. I mean, this is amazing technology. When I went traveling in 1996 and ended up in Uzbekistan, no one had a mobile phone, no one had an email address, and the internet did not exist. That's 25 years ago. And I talk a lot about that. I was watching a talk, and I cannot find it for the life of me. There was a TED talk by one of the world's leading neuroscientists. I watched it a few years ago now. And he was saying someone living in a city anywhere in the world in 2000, as it would be 21, is being exposed to the same levels of stimulus in one day that someone 250 years ago would have been exposed to in their whole lifetime. And he graphed it, and it showed for 249,750 years, we were exposed to a fairly similar level of stimulus. The human brain and nervous system was gently evolving over that period of time. 250 years ago, steam turned up, and the Industrial Revolution took place, and then electricity and cars, and then the world wars and the technology that came out of that. Plane travel only became available to the general population in 1965. To general commercial airlining was only the mid-1960s. This is 2 seconds ago. The media boom of the 80s, 90s, mobile phones started turning up, noughties, the internet. This line goes like this for 249,700 years, and then it starts going like this, and then we're at this point where this thing's just going stratospheric. We're living in this world where things are moving so quickly, and this is why our technique, we need to counterbalance that. That's what our practice does beautifully. And so we're positioned in this incredible time in human history where we've got a tool in the toolbox that we can show others how to use it. What I love about our practice is it's what I call, when I teach people to meditate, it's what I call teaching people how to ride the meditation bike. And when someone's learning to ride a bike, they need to be fitted for the right size bike. They need someone to hold the back of the bike while they get their balance. With correct instruction, anybody can ride a bike. I say meditation is exactly the same. Correct mantra, passed on correctly, with correct instruction, anybody can meditate. But we need those three things. And we have the ability to transfer that knowledge with those three beautiful things. Correct mantra, passed on correctly, correct instruction, allowing the mind to go within the infinite repercussions of that is just extraordinary. And 6,000 initiations in, it's still blows my mind to watch someone transcend for the first time.
Amazing. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, Tim. I thank you very much for your time and generosity and stories. And here's to the next 6,000.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I've done all the talking, and I'd love so much to know more about you, Derrick and Anthony, and hope we can do that another time.
Okay, thanks for sticking around to the end. This season, we're looking to engage with you, our audience. We would love to know what topics and themes would be of interest to you. And also, would you like to be our guest? Perhaps you might be interested in coming on the show yourself. We'd love to have you here, and we'd love to hear your ideas. Please share your thoughts with us by sending us an email at stories@thevediconversation.com. And if you've enjoyed the show, please give us a like and a review or share it with your friends. See you next time.